Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Star Wars Newsnet YouTube channel. Before we get into it, be sure to like and subscribe to get more of these types of talks about Star Wars, because today we are joined by a very special guest, Alexander Freed, author of the upcoming Star Wars Reign of the Empire, The Mask of Fear. That book is sitting right over here into the corner. It is basically the story of the first year of the rule of the Empire. And if you like your Andor, highly recommend this book as well. So we are joined today by the man himself, Alexander Freed. Alexander, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for bringing me on.
Yeah, it's a really exciting book. It's well worth the investment. It's a chunky boy, but you're not going to be disappointed by any page, I don't think, if you're into that political thriller type of vibe. But first things first, I just wanted to ask you just a super general um, thing about your approach to when you tell Star Wars stories, because you've written in the political sphere. You've written the Rogue One novelization, Alphabet Squadron, of course, all kinds of different stuff. So when you write for Star Wars, what types of themes and story elements do you try to incorporate?
Yeah, it's it's actually a little bit hard for me to answer this because I've been doing it so long that a lot of it has just become instinct, right? I thought about it very, very carefully at the start, and now it's just habit. But I think certainly the existence of sort of a clear good and evil in the universe, right? Like regardless of whether or not any of the characters know about it, whether or not they are finding their way out there, like the Sith are evil, the Jedi are good. You can bring nuance to that with specific characters, but the Force is ultimately a binary source of morality, and that gives a real power to those poles out in the universe. Certainly the notion of found family, both in some ways literal found family in the case of someone like Luke, who goes out and runs into his long lost family members across the course of the series, but also just people coming together and bonding through trial, and finding their people, finding their tribe in that sense. And I think ultimately a mix of um, belief that belief that peace and negotiation and a sense of being able to work out differences is an incredibly important part of the world, while still accepting that often things will collapse into violence. I think both sides of that coin are pretty well baked into the setting, and those are some of the big things kind of hovering over all Star Wars work.
Mhm. Yeah, I love asking that question to anyone I get to talk to in the publishing world, because the answers are so varied in your approach to how you tell Star Wars stories. But in regards to Mask of Fear, one comparison that the book and furthermore this trilogy will never be able to escape from is Andor. The second season of which is coming out in just a couple weeks, April 22nd. So when writing this book, what was the process or the inspirations that you had to implement from that show as you were working on this book, if there were any?
Yeah, it was not a direct connection. Like the way
Mm-hmm.
we talked about it internally was, um, we did not talk about it as an Andor tie-in,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we avoided using that language among ourselves. It was very much like, hey, Andor is opening up this world. It's opening up, it's creating interest in the audience for grounded political stories like these. Um, let's try something here. So certainly there are ties to Andor continuity in there, right? Like Andor introduced Mon Mothma's husband Perrin, so this being a story with a lot of Mothma in it, we absolutely get more on Perrin. Obviously, there's a Saw connection. The title itself is coming from Andor, but it's sort of in its own world, playing in its own lane, while hopefully being resonant with the themes and ideas of Andor. I think if there's one thing that I sort of thought about and tried to emulate a little bit more directly, is Andor, I thought, did a fantastic job of just keeping the level of tension and threat present in every single scene. Like there's never a moment where the world feels safe in Andor. And I did give that a little bit of thought as I went into this project.
Yeah, for sure. So along those same lines of your inspirations for this book, what lessons or inspiration did you pull in from your previous work, like the Rogue One book or Alphabet Squadron? Did you pull anything from there?
Yeah, Rogue One certainly has some character crossover in there,
Hmm.
since Rogue One's got, I mean, it's got a solid amount of Saw and Mon Mothma. It's even got a little bit of Bail Organa in there as well. So that was all experience that served me well, just getting to know these characters, and having had a little bit of experience with them before. Um, you know, this is true a little bit of Rogue One as well, but Alphabet Squadron,
Hmm.
honestly, was really useful for spending some time with a large cast of characters, which this book also has. So it's not a Star Wars specific thing, but that was a new skill that I was developing as I was working on the Alphabet Squadron books. Is all right, how do I balance this large of a cast? And yeah, had to come into to this one and apply some of those skills, and that made me perhaps bolder than I should have been, depending on how cluttered the manuscript feels. Hopefully, it's seamless and everyone feels like, oh wow, it just balances so many elements well. But if not, then yes, overbold.
Yeah, for sure. So ironically, that kind of leads into another question I had. So with Alphabet Squadron, a lot of the casts were original or newer or fairly lesser known characters. Meanwhile, with Mask of Fear, the cast is more well known among the fans. So, what was it like dealing with more established characters in Star Wars?
Yeah, I mean it's a different art in a lot of respects. Fortunately, these. I mean, I say fortunately. Fortunately, in certain ways, it's always you've got more freedom to work the less established a character is. That doesn't mean that the end resulting story is more or less interesting, but it the process of working with a more defined character, it restricts where you can go, and that means that yeah, your focus needs to be in other places to pull off a really great story. You need to have you know a a different set of skills or an additional set of skills. So Mask of Fear was a bit of a middle ground, right? We know Saw and Mon and Bale, but they're not Han and Luke and Leia, right? Like
Yeah.
we know who these people are, we know where they're going, but there's still a good amount of room for development of them. And that gave me some room to work. Um, it did mean that they were the foundational pillars of this project, right? Everything else kind of moves around them. When I was developing the plot, it didn't matter if I, suddenly had an inspiration where I was like, oh, if I just I just removed Bail from the plot and focused on Mon and Saw, then I could do all of these amazing things. Like, no, no, these are the this is the structure that the story needs to be built around. So everything kind of evolves from um, the character journeys that we wanted to take those characters on, and yeah, I mean it's an interesting process. It is distinct from working with original characters. Um, it's also distinct from something like the Rogue One novelization, where obviously there was, you know, very it was about taking the text of the movie and enriching it and expanding it, but very much not changing anything. So that was also interesting experience bringing to bear. Yeah, that was a rambly answer, but hopefully there's
Yeah.
something interesting in there.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I hate to I hate to keep bringing up Alphabet Squadron, but there's a lot of comparisons with this one and this Reign of the Empire trilogy because it's new trilogies, and this one being the first. But the difference here is you're only writing the first book. Meanwhile, Alphabet Squadron, you had the whole thing. So comparing the two, what was the collaborative process like with this one versus just being able to do whatever you wanted with Alphabet Squadron virtually? So, like, I'm sure conversations were had with Rebecca Roanhorse and Fran Wild as far as what they're going to do. So, what was that process like?
So the way the trilogy is structured, we're going to have pretty big time gaps between each
Hmm.
of the books, right? We've got a 2 decades to cover over the course of the reign of the empire. Um, so from a structural standpoint, it meant that we did not have to do a lot of direct collaboration.
Okay.
It was really more of a um, Lucasfilm and Random House Worlds had a clear sense of here are the structures, the ideas that we want to set up in this first book. Right, hit the tone, make it sort of standalone within its time period, set up an array of original characters who could go in a number of different directions, set up some plot hooks, but don't box anyone in. So it was really much more about putting a lot of toys into the sandbox that then Rebecca Roanhorse could then pick and choose from in book two, rather than sort of tightly coordinating. Okay, this is how this thread is going to play out across all three books, and it's very very different from Alphabet Squadron, clearly, since I had full control over that and could plot it all out from the beginning, but also my impression not having a lot of particular insight into different from how the High Republic is working, where it is very carefully sort of chained together. This is a trilogy that I think is really designed to bring out the best of the individual authors' voices in each book and let them do their own thing in a way that when you put all the books together, it's going to create a really interesting, chronicle of the era where each book is in conversation with the others without feeling like it is, a tightly plotted, serialized, you know, point A to point B to point C. It's no, we're going from point A to point M to point Z,
Okay.
and I think that's going to be exciting in its own way.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. So basically, the idea is even if you miss this book for some un, unforeseen reason, you could pick up the next book and be theoretically totally fine. That's an interesting concept to go about
I
with this story.
I think so. Like obviously, if we do this right, like reading them in a row is going to create a much greater whole than
Hmm.
reading them individually. But yeah, I think reading them individually will give you a compelling story about that particular era of
Okay.
the empire and these characters. And if you want to, know, oh, well, where did all of this start? How did this, where did these characters come to these beliefs from? Then, hey, you can go back a book, or if you want to see how it all comes together, or if you want to see like, okay, well, what, these characters are making tough decisions, like how is that going to affect them down the line? Who are they going to become as these things pile up and pile up? You can jump, however many years into the future, and read that last book, which will be its own sort of weary chronicle of the latter days of the empire.
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear, don't miss Mask of Fear. Pick it up and read it. I mean, I don't want to encourage not reading a Star Wars book by any stretch of the imagination, but that's definitely interesting perspective on that. So diving a little bit deeper into the book itself, can you share which character or character dynamic kind of was your favorites to tackle and explore? Was there a particular one that you had fun going back to?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I mean, it's not a gigantic part of the book, but I had a surprising amount of fun writing Mon and Perrin.
Mhm.
Right, like that was actually a dynamic that changed a bit through the drafts of the book. First run out. Instructions from Lucasfilm had been like, yeah, go pretty light on Perrin content. He's really Tony Gilroy's character. It's that character belongs to Andor. We don't want to step on anyone's toes. So, I did. Like, there were Mon had a husband, right? It wasn't that he was out of the book entirely, but it was just sort of brief glimpses. And as folks reviewed that first draft, there was a sense of, what, we can afford to do a little bit more here. And by that time, I had kind of developed a taste for the complexity of that relationship. So that got to get fleshed out a little bit, and we get to see them. They're in a better place than they are in Andor. You're not seeing a great deal of fondness between Mon and her husband in Andor
Mhm.
season one. Their relationship is still a rocky one in Mask of Fear, but it's a different kind of rocky. So that was a lot of fun. You know, I had I felt lucky that I was able to do the stuff with Mon and Bale as a pairing that I was able to do. I don't want to get too much into spoilers here, because a large part of the book really is about Mon, Bale, and Saw going in their own directions, and where those paths actually cross over are some of the big dramatic beats of the story. But getting to set up Mon and Bale as two people who are both well-intended, decent, upstanding people who are not getting along the way that we have often seen them portrayed. Being in ideological alignment does not necessarily mean that you're friends, and they are both going through some trying times. And yeah, getting that dynamic onto the page was satisfying.
Yeah, for sure. I for right now, one of my favorite things about the book is how you've handled Bale, and Bale's a character that I've always been attached to. It's funny because as a kid, I was watching the prequel trilogy, thinking he's just this massive figure in the trilogy, but now going back, he's only in about maybe 5-10 minutes of the whole trilogy, so he's not really a massive character. But for whatever reason, I just thought he was this larger than life personality, and seeing where you take him in this book was such a fascinating thing that I never really thought about. So, yeah, that was fun to get into, and I'm looking forward to seeing where that blossoms to as that character goes forward.
I'm glad he worked for you. He was, as I mentioned earlier, I had more experience with Mon and Saw from Rogue One and from some other
Mhm.
works that I'd done. Bale was the character I had the least experience with, and probably the character who, at least of the three, who I had the most conversations with Random House Editorial and Lucasfilm about, sort of trying to really understand what that character was about and his balance of sort of family concerns and worldly concerns. So yeah, that one took a bit of work on my part before I found my footing. So I'm very pleased to hear that he's working for you.
Yeah, for sure. He's just a fascinating character, and I'm looking forward to more from that particular guy. And yeah, as you mentioned with Mon, yeah, it's not something you think about a whole lot in terms of how the politicians have to kind of work around how they want to combat the empire. It's definitely interesting dynamic in the book. But I just wanted to ask, as we're kind of wrapping up here, is there anything at all that you could tease about? You touched on it earlier, but is there anything else you could a little bit more specific as to what we can expect going forward with the Reign of the Empire trilogy? Is there anything at all you can say?
Oh, with the future books.
Yep.
Not a lot. I've seen a bunch of notes of where Rebecca Roanhorse is taking the second book. Some of them certainly took me by surprise in a pleasant
Okay.
way. There are characters from this first book. There's at least one character in there, who I don't think even made it into my outline, who was a minor enough character that, just sort of showed up in the writing to facilitate other scenes, that Rebecca Roanhorse is taking and running with a bit, and I was delighted to see, like, oh, okay, yeah, no, you're taking these and you are running with this. There are also some sort of, mid-sized characters in Reign of the Empire, or in Mask of Fear as well, who are going to take on a significantly larger role. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. She's gonna have her own focus, and that, for me, that's exciting, right? Like, it's going to be a new perspective on this world and these characters, and I'm looking forward to seeing the final version.
That is a satisfactory enough tease to curb us for the next year of waiting for the next chapter or however long it is. I'm not quite sure about the timeline of what they're thinking. But last question here. As you now move on and kind of rest on your laurels with this book, I just wanted to, kind of poke your brain as to what's next. Are there any other Star Wars characters you'd still like to write or go back to? Specifically, I'm a big fan of the Twilight Company books, so I'd love to see those characters again one day. But is there anything that you in particular would like to kind of get your chance to get a crack at?
Yeah, I always try to approach every Star Wars project as if it is likely my last one. You
Okay.
never know when opportunities are going to come up in the future. So, I try to make sure that I feel like, okay, am I okay calling it quits here? Have I done my best? But I will forever feel lucky, to be approached for these sorts of things. So if the opportunity were to come up again, sure. I mean, I'd always love to revisit some of the old favorites. I don't have a burning story waiting for
Okay.
a new Twilight Company, but certainly I could find one if the opportunity came up. I would love at some point to, write a Star Wars piece more focused on the mysticism of the world, right? Like,
Okay.
veer really into the fantasy side of space fantasy, because as much as I've loved doing the sort of more more grounded force as a distant, mystical concept stuff, I've not had a lot of opportunities to do. Hey, this is a Jedi or this is a Sith, and this is what the Force feels like and means like to them, and let's go fight monsters. So I think as a change of pace, and just as a those are important concepts, and concepts that really interest me. Yeah, I I would love a chance to go full mystic fantasy in Star Wars if that opportunity came up.
That would be fascinating to see your approach to that because, yeah, I love that side of Star Wars too. As much as I love the grounded elements of it, at the end of the day, it's a fantasy. It's a space fantasy that none of us really understand. So that'd be a really fun concept to try to explore. And one day we'll see. Yeah, we will see what happens. Always in motion is the future, but for right now in the present, Reign of the Empire, Mask of Fear is out today. If you're watching, hopefully we get this out on time for that. But as we wrap up, Alexander, where can people find you online if they want to praise the book or I don't know, criticize the book if they so choose?
Either way, yes, my online presence has dimmed over the years,
Hmm.
but I am on and off Blue Sky at
Okay.
Alexander M. Freed. Um, I've also got a sadly out of date, but still perfectly functional website at alexanderfreed.com. If you ignore the fact that it's out of date, it does have quite a few articles on writing, on video game writing in particular, on other work that I've done, and contact info for email. So those are the best ways to keep up.
All right, sounds good. Once again, pick up Reign of the Empire, Mask of Fear out now. You will not be disappointed, in my opinion. And be sure to like and subscribe to this video and to our channel and get all your latest news and coverage and all that stuff at StarWarsNewsNet.com. For me, Nate, Alexander, thank you again for joining us. Have a good day, guys.